That said, speaking of not going far in the darts tournament, it was an early exit for the two BDO invited players, Mikuru Suzuki and Wayne Warren, the two defending and last ever world champions and likely the last ever BDO invited players. What are your favorite memories, though, that you'll keep from the PDC versus BDO chapter of the Grand Slam over the last 14 years?
Yeah, there's quite a few, actually. And when I think of the Grand Slam, it is one of those tournaments that really got my interest in darts. Probably said on this show before, early days following the sport, I didn't have Sky at all. So for me, watching the darts, it was either going around my grandparents who had Sky to watch it, or having to make do with when it was on the BBC with the Lakeside and sometimes the World Masters. But when this tournament got introduced, 2007, it was on ITV, so it was a free-to-air tournament. So yeah, lots of good memories from those early days before it came over to Sky, watching it on ITV and seeing all these different players that I've not seen as much of before. But as far as the BDO, yeah, there's lots of memories from those early days. Go back to the very first couple of years. Gary Anderson was in this tournament as a BDO player, and one of the best games in the history of the Grand Slam, that 2008 semi-final, him and Terry Jenkins both averaging, I think Jenkins was 102, Gary Anderson 105. So it was a quality game over 30 legs. If you can find it on YouTube, go and give it a watch if you get a spare 45 minutes, hour, or however long the game was. I can't remember now, but plenty of other ones in there as well. I'll give a mention to Ted Hankey in those early days, his first taste of the PDC in the crowd and not quite getting to grips with the crowd. The crowd went against him a little bit. And again, that's a good one to go and watch on YouTube for that. It's entertainment value, at least, anyway. Even the other side of things with Ted, okay, we loved it when he had the interaction with the crowd, but his darts did the talking as well. I remember a game he had with Phil Taylor one night in the group stage that went all the way, and he got over the line and beat him. That had that big game feel to it, even though it was a group game. Seeing them two go up against each other, a rare occasion on TV, was a good one. A couple others in more recent times. Of course, got to give a mention to Martin Adams when this tournament first got introduced. For so many years, he turned down the invite. He didn't want to play. He wasn't interested. Then all of a sudden, he comes into it. 2015, wins all three of his group games, gets through to the last 16, and he had a brilliant time playing in it. So that was nice to see. I think Andy Fordham played that year as well. But yeah, there's been lots of good times, and sadly, this is going to be the end of it for the BDO players. But there's been a lot of great times watching these guys go up against the best from the PDC.
But speaking of Ted Hankey, that first time that he really went on a run, I think he made the quarterfinals. Do you recall who beat him?
I think that might have been Mark Walsh. I'll have to double check though.
I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that was a couple months before I first ever watched darts, because my first world championship that I watched was the 2012 World Championships, and this would have been just a month before that. So I just missed out on one of the great moments in the history of sport. Beyond that, some of the memories that I do have, sticking to PDC versus BDO, I mean, you can't get past Scott Waite's performances, making 3 semifinals or better, 2 finals, and lifting the trophy once from 8-0 down against James Wade, the most dangerous lead in darts, 8-0. You mentioned as well the debut was it 2015, after turning down so many times to the point that they stopped inviting him. But when Wolfie finally made his debut and really just soaked up the PDC atmosphere and soaked up the crowd, and was probably the most popular player in the field, in a field that included Phil Taylor, in a field that included Michael Van Gogh and Gary Anderson, it was Martin Adams who the crowd took most to, because they'd never, many of them grew up watching him on the BBC, but they never seen him play in PDC, or at least hadn't seen him play in the PDC in 14 years. I'm also going to throw out just one more. It was, I wish I had written down ahead of time, because I might have the year wrong. I can't remember if it was 2015 or 2016. So y'all are going to bear with me while I double check this, because I want to get the year right, because it was 2015. It deserves to have the year right. And it was Andy Fordham's return to televised darts after his health problems and everything. He won through his qualifier. For those who don't remember, that took place at the World Masters, but the qualifier was going on while Sky Sports was broadcasting the World Grand Prix. He was in a last leg decider, and the commentators interrupted the PDC broadcast of the World Grand Prix to mention the fact that Andy Fordham had won the BDO qualifier to the Grand Slam. And then Andy Fordham goes out and plays Adrian Lewis in that first match, and it's like the Andy Fordham of old. Okay, he lost 5-2, but Adrian Lewis played brilliantly. Andy Fordham didn't do much wrong, averaged nearly 100, and it didn't really click from him after that. Okay, he did win a match, but he was nowhere near that. But that match against Adrian Lewis, in his return to play like that, was one of the great moments in darts, especially for someone like me who knows about Andy Fordham, but it never got to see him because he was before my time. That's one of the memories that I'll never forget.